Penelope O'Connor knew the moment the cattle broker spat tobacco juice at her feet that she had lost yet another potential sale. Her hand instinctively rose to cover her mouth, that crooked smile that had been her curse since birth, twisting her otherwise lovely face into what the townsfolk of Dry Creek, Colorado called the Devil's Grin. It was 1878, and a woman running a cattle ranch alone already faced enough scrutiny without the added burden of a facial deformity that made folks uncomfortable. "Sorry, Miss O'Connor, but I can't do business with someone who can't even look me in the eye when we're talking," the broker said, his tone more condescending than apologetic. "How am I supposed to trust you?" Penelope swallowed her pride, her fingers trembling slightly at her side. "My cattle are the finest in the territory, Mr. Douglas. Their quality has nothing to do with my face." The broker adjusted his hat and mounted his horse. "Maybe so, but I've got other options. Good day to you." As he rode away, Penelope blinked back tears. The O'Connor ranch had been her father's pride and joy before consumption took him 6 months ago. Now it was all she had left, and it was slowly slipping through her fingers. The drought had already taken half her herd, and without a sale soon, she'd lose the rest and the ranch along with them. "Vultures, the lot of them," came a gruff voice from behind her. Penelope spun around to find Owen Hayes leaning against the post office wall, his weathered Stetson pulled low over eyes that had seen more than their fair share of hardship. The man was a legend in these parts, a cowboy who'd driven cattle through Apache territory when others wouldn't dare, who'd survived 3 blizzards on the open range, who'd once taken a bullet mint for the territorial governor. "Mr. Hayes," she acknowledged, trying to turn her face away. "I didn't realize anyone was listening." "Hard not to hear a man make a fool of himself," Owen replied, pushing off from the wall. At 34, he was lean and tough as jerky, with a quiet confidence that needed no bluster. "Your father had the best breeding stock in Colorado territory. Any broker worth his salt would know that." Penelope's hand went instinctively to her mouth again. "Perhaps, but it seems my father's reputation isn't enough anymore." Owen's eyes narrowed. "It's not your cattle they're turning down." She looked away, the familiar shame burning her cheeks. "I should get back to the ranch. The hands will be waiting for instructions." "Miss O'Connor," Owen called as she started to walk away. "I've been meaning to speak with you about something." Penelope paused, curious despite herself. Owen Hayes rarely sought anyone out for conversation. "Yes. I've got 30 head I'm looking to sell. Prime beef. Thought maybe we could combine our herds, make it worth a Kansas City buyer's trip out here." She turned back, suspicion creeping into her voice. "And why would you want to do business with me? Everyone knows your ranch is doing just fine." Owen's expression didn't change. "Because Jacob O'Connor was the only man who gave me a chance when I first came to these parts. And because I know good cattle when I see them." Penelope studied him, searching for pity in his gaze, but found only straightforward business interest. "I'll consider it, Mr. Hayes. But I don't take charity." His mouth twitched. "Never thought you did. Stop by my place tomorrow if you're interested. We can discuss terms." As she watched him walk away, Penelope wondered if this was just another dead end, or if Owen Hayes might be different from the others. She'd learned the hard way that most folks' kindness dried up fast when faced with her crooked smile. The next morning, Penelope rode out to the Hayes ranch at dawn. The place was smaller than her own, but meticulously maintained. The barn was freshly painted, the corrals sturdy, and the modest ranch house had curtains in the windows, a touch that surprised her, given that Owen lived alone. She found him in the barn, shoeing a chestnut mare. He glanced up at her approach but continued his work. "You're early," he commented, hammering a nail into place. "Ranchers can't afford to waste daylight," she replied, standing awkwardly at the barn entrance. Owen nodded, finishing with the horse before wiping his hands on a rag. "Coffee's hot in the house if you want some." Penelope followed him to the ranch house, where she was struck by the unexpected tidiness. A bookshelf lined one wall, filled with volumes on cattle breeding, Western expansion, and surprisingly, poetry. The furniture was simple but well made, and a colorful quilt hung on one wall. "My mother's," Owen explained, noticing her gaze on the quilt. "Only thing I brought with me from Tennessee." As they settled at the kitchen table with steaming cups of coffee, Owen laid out his proposal. He had contacts with a buyer in Kansas City who was looking for premium stock, but the buyer wouldn't make the trip for less than 100 head. Between your 70 and my 30, we'd have enough to interest him, Owen explained. And your breeding stock would fetch top dollar. Better than selling locally at rock-bottom prices. Penelope frowned. And how would we get them to market? I can't afford to hire enough hands for a drive. I've got 3 good men. With your 2, plus us, we could make it work. 6-day drive to the railhead at Pueblo, then ship them east. She considered the proposal carefully. It made good business sense, but there was something that didn't add up. Why me, Mr. Hayes? There are other ranchers you could partner with. Owen met her gaze directly. Because your cattle are the best. And because I'm tired of watching good people get pushed around by fools. For a moment, Penelope forgot to hide her smile, and it stretched across her face, pulling up higher on the right than the left, exposing more teeth on that side. When she realized, she quickly covered it with her hand. Owen's eyes tracked the movement, and something in his expression hardened. Don't do that. I beg your pardon. Hide your smile. There's nothing wrong with it. Penelope felt heat rise in her cheeks. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate your business proposal, but I don't need your pity regarding my condition. It's not pity, Miss O'Connor. It's respect. He leaned forward. I've known men with perfect faces and rotten souls. A crooked smile doesn't tell me anything except maybe you've had to be stronger than most. His words caught her off guard. No one had ever spoken to her so directly about her face, at least not kindly. Most pretended not to notice while staring when they thought she wasn't looking. I'll consider your offer, she said stiffly, rising from the table. I'll let you know my decision tomorrow. Owen stood as well. Fair enough. But Miss O'Connor, she paused at the door. If we do this, we're partners. Equals. I won't have you hiding from buyers or letting me do all the talking. Your father built that herd with his own hands, and you've kept it going. You deserve the respect that comes with that. Penelope didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded and left, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. By the time she reached her ranch, she had made her decision. She couldn't afford to let pride stand in the way of saving what her father had built. The next day, she returned to the Hayes ranch and agreed to his proposal. They would combine their herds and drive them to Pueblo within the week. The preparations for the cattle drive consumed the next few days. Penelope worked alongside Owen and their 5 hands, gathering the herds, branding the unmarked calves, and planning their route. To her surprise, Owen treated her exactly as he treated the men, with gruff respect and the expectation of competence. On the morning of their departure, Penelope sat astride her favorite mare, surveying the combined herd. 103 head of prime Colorado beef, representing everything she had left in the world. If this drive failed, she would lose the ranch for certain. Ready? Owen asked, riding up beside her on his buckskin gelding. As I'll ever be, she replied, tugging her hat lower to shield her face from the sun and from him. The first day passed without incident, the cattle moving steadily along the trail Owen had chosen. That night, as they made camp beside a creek, Penelope helped prepare the evening meal while the men tended to the herd. Miss O'Connor, called Hank, one of Owen's hands. The boss says you make the best biscuits in the territory. That true? Penelope looked up in surprise. My father thought so, but I wouldn't make such claims myself. Well, we're all hoping to find out, said Thatcher, her own ranch hand, with a grin. Mr. Hayes has been talking up your cooking something fierce. She glanced toward Owen, who was brushing down his horse at the edge of camp, apparently oblivious to the conversation. Had he really been praising her to his men? The thought made her stomach flutter in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The biscuits turned out well, despite the constraints of trail cooking. As the men devoured them alongside beans and salt pork, Penelope found herself watching Owen. He ate quietly, contributing occasionally to the conversation, but mostly listening. There was a stillness to him that she found intriguing, a man comfortable in his own skin. These are even better than the boss said, Hank declared, reaching for another biscuit. Owen glanced up, catching Penelope's eye across the fire. I told you they were good. Miss O'Connor doesn't do anything halfway. The simple compliment warmed her more than the campfire. When she smiled reflexively, she caught herself starting to raise her hand to cover it, but stopped when she saw Owen's eyes narrow slightly. Instead, she let her smile remain uncovered, though it felt like standing naked in church. After dinner, as the men settled in with coffee and tobacco, Owen approached her with a steaming cup. Thought you might want some before turning in, he said, offering the coffee. Thank you. She accepted it gratefully, the night chill already settling into her bones. Owen sat beside her on a fallen log. You did well today. Most city folks would be complaining by now. Penelope laughed softly. I'm hardly city folk, Mr. Hayes. I was born in that ranch house and learned to ride before I could walk properly. Owen, he said quietly. Pardon, my name's Owen. If we're partners, seems right you should use it. She nodded slowly. Then I suppose you should call me Penelope. Penelope, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. It suits you. Strong name. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching the stars emerge overhead. It had been a long time since Penelope had felt so at ease in someone's company. Most people stared or averted their eyes when they spoke to her, but Owen looked at her directly, without flinching or focusing on her mouth. Can I ask you something? She ventured finally. Reckon you just did, but go ahead and ask another. Why did you really want to partner with me? The truth, please. Owen considered her question, taking his time before answering. Your father saved my life once. Did he ever tell you that story? Penelope shook her head, surprised. I was new to the territory, got caught in a blizzard up in the high country. Your father found me half frozen and brought me to your ranch. Nursed me back to health for 2 weeks before I could ride again. Owen's voice grew softer. When I tried to pay him, he refused. Said all he wanted was for me to do the same for someone else someday. That sounds like my father, Penelope murmured. When I heard about his passing, I wanted to help, but I knew you were proud. Like him. Owen met her gaze. This partnership isn't charity, Penelope. It's me keeping a promise to a good man. And it's good business besides. She believed him, and that realization was both comforting and terrifying. If Owen wasn't motivated by pity, then his kindness toward her, his insistence that she not hide her smile. That was something else entirely. The next morning brought new challenges. As they were breaking camp, dark clouds rolled in from the west, bringing with them a sudden, violent thunderstorm. The cattle grew restless, and it took all 6 of them to keep the herd from scattering across the prairie. Penelope rode alongside the most skittish animals, her slicker providing little protection against the driving rain. A crack of lightning struck nearby, sending a group of yearlings into a panic. As she turned her horse to head them off, her mare slipped in the mud, going down hard. Penelope was thrown clear, but landed awkwardly, pain shooting through her ankle. Before she could gather herself, the spooked yearlings were bearing down on her. She tried to scramble away, but her injured ankle gave way beneath her. Suddenly, Owen was there, his horse cutting in front of the charging cattle. He leaped from the saddle, scooped her up, and swung her onto his horse in one fluid motion before vaulting up behind her. With expert handling, he guided his mount away from the danger, circling back around to help the other men regain control of the herd. Are you hurt? He shouted over the storm, one arm wrapped securely around her waist. My ankle, she called back. I think it's just twisted. Once the herd was settled, Owen found a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock and helped Penelope dismount. His hands were gentle but efficient as he examined her ankle. Not broken, he pronounced after careful probing. But you won't be riding today. I have to, she protested. We can't afford to lose a rider. Owen's expression was implacable. You'll ride in the chuck wagon until we make camp. Then we'll see how it looks. Despite her objections, Penelope found herself installed in the wagon for the remainder of the day's journey. By evening, the storm had passed, leaving behind mud and swollen streams. They made camp on higher ground, and Owen helped her to a spot by the fire before seeing to his horse. Thatcher, who had some experience with injuries, wrapped her ankle tightly and advised her to stay off it for at least a day. The news frustrated her. They couldn't afford delays, and she hated feeling useless. That night, after the others had turned in, Owen brought her a cup of coffee laced with whiskey. For the pain, he explained, settling beside her. Thank you for what you did today, Penelope said after taking a sip. The whiskey burned pleasantly down her throat. You saved my life. Owen shrugged. You'd have done the same. Still, not everyone would risk themselves that way. He gazed into the fire. I've seen too many good people die needlessly. Wasn't about to let that happen to you. Something in his tone made Penelope study him more closely. You've lost someone. It wasn't a question, but Owen answered anyway. My wife and son. Cholera. 10 years ago now. The revelation stunned her. I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were married. Most folks don't know. Happened back in Tennessee, before I came west. His voice was matter of fact, but Penelope could hear the old pain beneath the words. Sarah was 18. Our boy just turned 2. Is that why you came west? To escape the memories? Owen nodded slowly. Partly. Also because there was nothing left for me there. He glanced at her. What about you? No suitors vying for the O'Connor ranch. Penelope gave a bitter laugh. Hardly. Men might want my land, but they don't want a wife who makes children run screaming. Children are fools, Owen said flatly. And so are men who can't see past appearances. It's always been this way, she said quietly. My mother said the midwife crossed herself when I was born, called me marked by the devil. She touched her cheek self-consciously. The muscles never formed right on this side. Doctors in Denver said it couldn't be fixed. Owen's gaze was steady. Does it pain you? No. It's just there. Part of me. She looked away. But it's the first thing people see. Sometimes the only thing. Not everyone. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Penelope felt suddenly vulnerable, more exposed than if she'd been unclothed before him. You should rest, Owen said, rising to his feet. We've got a long day tomorrow. But as he turned to go, Penelope caught his hand impulsively. Owen, thank you for seeing me. His fingers tightened briefly around hers. Good night, Penelope. The next day, her ankle was still tender but bearable. Against Thatcher's advice, she insisted on riding, though Owen positioned her at the rear of the herd where the pace was slowest. By midday, they had reached the banks of the Arkansas River, swollen from the recent rains. We'll need to find another crossing, Owen announced after scouting ahead. The ford's too deep. We'll head north, try our luck there. The detour would cost them at least half a day, maybe more. Penelope bit her lip, calculating the delay against their dwindling supplies. We could try to swim them across, suggested Hank. I've done it before. Owen shook his head. Too risky. We'd lose cattle for sure, maybe men too. There's an old trapper's cabin about 5 miles north, Penelope said. My father used to trade with him. He knows all the river crossings in these parts. Owen considered this. Worth a try? You lead. I'll follow. The cabin was still there, though weathered by years of harsh Colorado winters. The old trapper, McPherson, greeted them warily until he recognized Penelope. Jacob O'Connor's girl, he exclaimed, his leathery face breaking into a grin. Lord above, you've grown into a fine woman. Penelope smiled freely for once, touched by the old man's genuine welcome. McPherson had always treated her kindly, never commenting on her appearance. The trapper confirmed there was a safer crossing 3 miles upstream, and even offered to guide them there himself. That night, he insisted they camp near his cabin, regaling them with wild tales of his 40 years in the mountains. As the men laughed at one of McPherson's more outlandish stories, Penelope noticed Owen watching her. When their eyes met, he didn't look away, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, an understanding. Later, as she helped clean up after the meal, McPherson approached her. That Hayes fellow's a good man, the old trapper remarked casually. Watches you like a man who's found water in the desert. Penelope nearly dropped the plate she was washing. I don't know what you mean. McPherson chuckled. Course you do. You're smart like your pa? He glanced toward Owen, who was checking on the horses. Life's too short to waste chances, girl. I learned that the hard way. Before she could respond, the old man wandered off, leaving Penelope with thoughts she'd been trying to suppress since the journey began. The next morning, with McPherson's guidance, they successfully crossed the river without losing a single head of cattle. The old trapper refused payment, asking only that Penelope visit when she returned from Pueblo. As they continued their journey, Penelope found herself riding beside Owen more often, their conversations flowing more easily with each passing mile. On the 5th day, with Pueblo just a day's ride away, disaster struck. A rattlesnake spooked one of the lead steers, triggering a small stampede that separated 20 head from the main herd. Owen, Penelope, and Thatcher rode hard to round them up, finally corralling the runners in a small canyon as dusk approached. We'll have to stay with them overnight, Owen decided. Too risky to move them in the dark. Thatcher, ride back and tell the others to make camp. We'll rejoin them in the morning. After Thatcher departed, Penelope and Owen set about making a small camp. The night turned surprisingly cold, and they huddled close to their meager fire. "One more day," Penelope said, warming her hands. "I can hardly believe we've made it this far without more trouble." Owen smiled. "Don't tempt fate. We're not in Pueblo yet." As the temperature continued to drop, Penelope began to shiver despite her heavy coat. Without comment, Owen moved closer, draping his blanket over both of them. "Can't have you freezing to death within sight of the finish line," he said, his voice gruff. The warmth of his body beside hers was both comforting and unsettling. Penelope couldn't remember the last time she'd been this close to a man who wasn't her father. "Tell me something," Owen said after a while. "What will you do after we sell the cattle?" "Keep ranching." Penelope considered the question. "I don't know. The ranch is all I've ever known, but it's hard running it alone. Most of the hands left after father died. Only Thatcher and his brother stayed on." "You could hire more hands with the money from this sale." "I could, but the drought might continue. And there's always another challenge after that." She sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I should just sell the place, move to Denver. Start fresh where nobody knows me." Owen frowned. "Is that what you want? To leave?" "No," she admitted. "But sometimes it seems like the sensible thing to do." "Sensible isn't always right," he said quietly. "Running from problems just means finding new ones somewhere else," says the man who left Tennessee. Owen acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Fair point. But I wasn't running from problems so much as memories. There's a difference." They fell silent, the crackling of the fire the only sound besides the occasional lowing of cattle. Penelope was acutely aware of Owen's shoulder pressed against hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Penelope," he said finally, her name soft on his lips. "There's something I need to say." She turned to look at him, their faces suddenly very close. "Yes. I've been thinking about what happens after Pueblo. About what comes next." His eyes held her steadily. "I don't want this partnership to end with the sale." Penelope's heart began to race. "What are you saying, Owen?" "I'm saying I'd like to keep working with you. Our ranch is adjoined at the south pasture. We could combine operations, run them together. It would be more efficient, give us both a better chance of surviving the hard times." She studied his face, trying to read his true intentions. "Is this a business proposal?" Owen hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "Not entirely, no." "Then what is it?" "It's me asking if you might consider a more permanent arrangement. Between us." Penelope's breath caught in her throat. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "Owen, She turned away, her hand rising instinctively to cover her mouth. "You don't have to do this. The cattle drive was enough. I don't need you to sacrifice yourself out of some misplaced sense of obligation to my father." Owen gently caught her wrist, pulling her hand away from her face. "This has nothing to do with your father, or obligation, or sacrifice." His voice grew softer. "It has everything to do with the fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you walked into my barn." Penelope shook her head, disbelieving. "You can't mean that. No one looks at me and sees someone to want." "I do." His hand moved to her cheek, his thumb tracing the crooked line of her smile. "This smile of yours. It's the most honest thing I've ever seen. It shows exactly who you are, someone who keeps going despite what life throws at her. Someone real." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Owen's gaze was unwavering. "I've had 10 years to learn what matters in this life, Penelope. It isn't perfect faces or what other folks think. It's finding someone who makes you feel like you've come home after a long journey." A tear slipped down her cheek. "And I make you feel that way." "Yes," he said simply. "You do." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Owen leaned forward and kissed her. His lips were gentle against hers, careful and questioning. When he started to draw back, Penelope surprised herself by following, deepening the kiss. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not asking for an answer now. Just think about it." Penelope nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. They spent the rest of the night beneath the shared blanket, talking intermittently about their lives, their hopes, their fears. By the time dawn broke over the canyon, something fundamental had shifted between them. The following day, they rejoined the main herd and made the final push to Pueblo. The railroad agent was impressed with the quality of their cattle and offered a fair price enough for Penelope to save her ranch and for Owen to expand his operations. As they watched the cattle being loaded onto the train, Owen stood beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "Have you thought about what I said?" he asked quietly. Penelope turned to face him, no longer hiding her smile. "I have. And I think we should try. Not rushing into anything, but seeing where it leads." The relief and joy that spread across Owen's face made her heart skip. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance." 6 months later, as the first snow of winter blanketed the Colorado foothills, Penelope stood in the doorway of Owen's ranch house, now their ranch house, watching him chop wood for the evening fire. They had been married 3 weeks earlier in a small ceremony attended by their ranch hands, McPherson, and a few neighbors. The partnership had proved successful beyond either of their expectations. By combining their herds and lands, they had created one of the most promising ranches in the territory. More importantly, they had found in each other something neither had expected to find again: happiness. As Owen stacked the last of the wood, he looked up and caught her watching him. His face broke into a warm smile as he walked toward her, stomping snow from his boots. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Hayes?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "About how lucky I am," she replied, her crooked smile spreading freely across her face. "And about how wrong everyone was." "About what?" "About this," she said, pointing to her smile. "They said no one would ever love me because of it. That no man would want to wake up to this face every day." Owen's expression softened as he traced the line of her jaw with his fingertips. They were wrong about a lot of things, but they were especially wrong about that smile. "Oh," she murmured, leaning into his touch. He confirmed, bending to kiss her gently. "Because this smile of yours, it's the one I'll happily wake to every day for the rest of my life." As snow continued to fall outside, Penelope and Owen Hayes stood wrapped in each other's arms, their future stretching before them like an unwritten story, one they would write together, one day at a time.